get to that in a minute or two. So let's look at the origins of this university.
Origins of University of Witwatersrand. So it needs, ooh, ooh, you know, I don't know what to say to you. I'm having goosebumps. So the university is linked with the city. So you cannot speak about the University of Witwatersrand without speaking about Johannesburg. The history of the university and the origins are linked to how Johannesburg became a city and how it would develop over the years. And so you can't therefore talk about Wits outside of the origins of Johannesburg. Now, the name Johannesburg is given, you know, and this of course takes us to history. The Zuid-Afrikaanse Republic under Paul Kruger, you know, he basically sent two commissioners, and that was Christian Joubert and Johan de Siek. Now, of course, to you, these names should come across as names of certain places. We know of Resiek Street in downtown Joburg, and we also know of Joubert Park, you know, in Joburg.
Yes, absolutely.
So these come from these two commissioners, Resiek, you know, Johan Resiek and Christian Joubert. Now, they're the ones who actually, and I just quote here, they informed Jos de Villiers to draw up a layout of 600 hectares of land, and basically they told him that after he draws it up, he's going to call the town Johannesburg. That was an instruction they got from Johan Resiek and Christian Joubert. So why this is important is because we can spend so much time on how Johannesburg became Johannesburg, but when Johannesburg became a town, because gold was discovered in the Witwatersrand, what happened would be they became a need, and here one of the central characters comes to play, Lord Milner. Now, Lord Milner is the one who said he wants a university to be erected in this part of the city, which would become where today you'd say Braamfontein. But then, you know, that's what we know today. But at the time, it's stretched. So the farm was called Rand. You know, some of these names run away from me. But basically, Braamfontein was a farm. It was, and because of colonization, because of the conflict between the British and the Boers, the then Afrikaners, you know, who argued that they're farmers. The tension they had basically led to a situation where, you know, Lord Milner decided that this university, and of course I'm saying university now, but at the time it was not called university. It went through different stages. So in 1919, what is known as, there's just so much. But in 1919, it would get a different name in Plain Street. But the university doesn't begin in Braamfontein. It begins in town, you know, in Lower City, Joburg. I mean, which is where today what you have as the train station in just off Ellis Park. That's where that train station.
Yeah.
That,
You're talking about Park Station. Sorry for the interruption. You have already answered my second question, which was who founded WITS, and you've told us it's Lord Milner. But let us go for an ad break, and when we come back, we'll have 10 minutes to wrap up. And let me throw these two questions at you, which are crucial. And that is, I'd like you to focus on the key developments of WITS University over the past 100 years, which you're already talking about right now. And, you know, the issue around the decolonizing of universities. So just mull on those two questions for a minute. When we get back, you'll respond to that for me. And of course, more historical facts around WITS University.
Approximately 785 million people in this world do not have access to safe, clean water. In developing countries, around 80% of all illnesses are due to contaminated water and poor sanitation. Don't let dirty water end a life. Build a water well in Bangladesh, Malawi, Nepal, Zimbabwe, or here at home in South Africa. Donate to Penny Appeal's Thirst Relief Project to bring safe, clean water to communities around the world.
Dr. Moloi is
www.pennyappeal.org.za.
brilliant.
Call 031
We should have given him more time. I should have cut the tennis interview a little shorter just to give him more time.
Big difference.
No, actually, because I thought I still had time. But anyway, be that as may, Dr. Moloi has got such. Maybe you can tell him we can do part of this, but because it's their 100th anniversary, we can carry on next week. This is something that can carry on next week.
Anniversary, or just a simple gift to show your love. Trust Randery Jewelers to make it special.
No, but Wits University has taken this entire year out to celebrate their centenary. No, my niece told me that.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil Triple Refined Pure
Okay, I just think this is a fascinating. I'm sad that we're going to have to cut it short because he's giving us amazing historical details, and I'd like to share it.
Or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Just tell him what I said. I'm so sorry that.
A shiver at his lips, mud on his clothes. When he is cold,
Are we ready to go?
chunks and the pain is more severe. What if this was your child? The Al-Imdad Foundation's Global Winter Appeal allows you to make a difference for refugees, IDPs, and struggling communities in 21 countries globally. Sponsor a winter pack today for just 600 Rand. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243.
Salam Media, a global voice for humanity.
9:52 exactly. I'm talking with Dr. Moloi. We're talking about Wits University celebrating its 100th year in existence. And Dr. Moloi, what I would like to say is that I am aware of the fact that Wits University has put aside 2022, an entire year of commemorating its centenary. So maybe in future programs we can still touch on this amazing institution and the history and the legacy, on us as South Africans. But back to you and the questions, the origins, the key developments of Wits over the past 100 years, and part of their transformational agenda. So over to you.
All right. Okay, so quickly, just a timeline. 1895, the School of Mines in Kimberley opens, and that's the first initial institution which is the origin of University of Witwatersrand in Kimberley. 1903, the Transvaal Technical Institute in Johannesburg opens. And then in 1906, the Transvaal University College opens. And then in 1916, the South African School of Mines and Technology at Elop Street, that's what I was talking about earlier in downtown Johannesburg, they open. And then the Transvaal University College in the same year, in 1916. In 1920, the University College Johannesburg. Now remember, I said to you, we cannot talk about University of Johannesburg without beginning with Wits. Here, for the first time, in 1920, it is called the University College Johannesburg. And so in 1922, it gets its university status on the 1st of March. Where it now becomes University of Witwatersrand for the first time, 1922, which is why today, in 2022, we are saying it's 100 years, right? And then in 1925, Witwatersrand Technical Institute was opened, which would, in 1930, would be renamed Witwatersrand Technical College. And then in 1930, what today we call University of Pretoria really comes from Transvaal University College. So, you know, you can't talk about these things in silence. They all have their origins, you know, under the same banner. 1967, Witwatersrand College for Advanced Technical Education is opened. 1979, Technikon Witwatersrand, what we call Witstech. And 2005, University of Johannesburg. So you can see from this timeline that, you know, we're actually talking about one institution. Wits University, Wits Technikon, University of Pretoria, and University of Johannesburg. It's the same origin. Okay? So we have confused people with the mergers, because moving from 35, 36 universities pre-94 to 23 post-94, we have really just confused the timeline with the different names. Anyway, the first chancellor of Wits was was the Governor General of the Union, Prince Arthur of Connaught. And the first VC was Professor Jan Hofmeyer. He also became the first principal and vice chancellor. So that's the origin, okay? And it's there's so much to be said, but we don't have time. So let me talk to you transformation. Over the years, Wits has battled what it calls its liberal identity. You know, they've always pitched themselves as autonomous. You know, they're not going to be dictated to by the government. But we know over the years, from Jan Smuts' time onwards, Jan Smuts being the first individual they give an honorary doctorate to, and as we're going to the list, the first black person to be given an honorary doctorate by Wits was in 1976. You do the math. Why that year? And again, look at who it was. It was a Reverend, okay, Matabati. Why did it have to be someone of religion? Anyway, moving on very quickly. In terms of transformation, we know that the fees must fall. 2015, 2016 compelled the university to make changes they did not feel comfortable to do. So, Senate House was renamed Solomon Masango House in honor of the struggle stalwart who was hanged in Pretoria. 2017, the Central Block was renamed Robert Sobukwe Block. They actually have a plaque there today. In honor of, you know, Robert Sobukwe, who was a language assistant. They were not allowed in 1958 when Sobukwe was on campus. They were not allowed to be called lecturers. So they called him a language assistant in the Xhosa, in the Bantu division, but he was teaching Xhosa. And so the university has renamed a Central Block after Robert Sobukwe. And then the mathematical sciences was named after Dr. Thamsanqa Wilkinson Kambule. This would be the first black professor at Wits, but he was a former principal of Orlando High School. Yeah, so there's so much I could say, but in a nutshell, Wits University's narrative and timeline is problematic because so many names are left out. A guy like John Orr at University of UJ Dorfontein campus today, there's a building called John Orr. Why on earth does Wits want to forget his name? Because what today we call Wits Tech, this is the founding director. And, you know, I could say so much, but why do we keep him out of history? Why does he not appear in the timeline? And so on and so forth. But let me pause there, Julie.
I think with 2 minutes to wrap up, I'm not even going to put the last question to you. I would like to think that our producer will allow us to continue this discussion next week, simply because we do know Wits University has set aside the entire year 2022 to celebrate its centenary. And I think a very important question is the era of decolonizing universities. A big question And I'm sure that you have an in-depth answer to that. And then also when and how. We know that back in the day, they had reserved spaces, and a certain number of students were taken in based on the color of their skin, and of course their pass marks, etc. I'd like to dig deeper into those issues, and where and how do we see the future in our new democracy for WITS and other universities. So if you will allow us, dearest Nasreen, we'd like to continue this conversation next week. Your closing thoughts, Dr. Moloi.
My closing thoughts are, people just need to know that the histories that we see on the websites of our respective universities are misleading. It's marketing exercises. They're selling brands. That university's history, which is on their website, is really economic with the origins and its storyline. And so with that said, I'm looking forward to continuing the dialogue next week on the history of that university.
Inshallah. And let's hope and pray that it is on their agenda, because it's their centenary, that it is on their agenda to not be so sparse with the information they've put on their website, and to put the facts down as they are, and to really name the people who've made a meaningful contribution to the success of this university. And I'm talking going way back in time, from the beginning of the startup of the universities up to now. Let's let Wits University fix the narrative, the historical narrative of its origins. So till next week then, always a pleasure talking to you. Go well, keep safe, and Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah ta'ala. Allahu Akbar.
1 after 10 o'clock exactly. A big thank you to Nasreen Anaidu, our producer. Please don't forget the COVID protocols. Also, take care on the roads. From me till next Monday morning, as always, Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.